Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to our Insider Insight Show. I'm honored to have back with me someone I consider a very dear friend and someone who takes on, well, the deep state, the globalist syndicate, the Bolshevik syndicate, whatever you want to call it, takes them on a daily basis. In fact, he has been targeted by that same entity. And the reason is because, and I don't think this is being unfair to him, in his earlier years, Dr. Michael Rectenwald was, I would consider him left of the Bolsheviks. And over time, Mike's become known throughout our country and the world as the anti-PC professor. That's how I remember Dr. Michael Rectenwald, the anti-PC professor. And this is what drives the Bolsheviks in academia, the globalist syndicate, the deep state crazy. Because someone who was left of some of them, in fact, is now an integral part and an important part of the freedom movement. A little background on Dr. Mike Rectenwald. He is the anti-PC professor. He was formerly based at NYU. He's the author of tremendous number of essays and of books. A couple of his most recent, Springtime for Snowflakes, Social Justice, and its Postmodern Parentage. His newest book, Google Archipelago. Little background on Mike's background. He obtained his Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Pittsburgh, his master's degree from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, and his PhD from the great Carnegie Mellon University. Mike was formerly a professor of global liberal studies at NYU. He's a fascinating individual. Every time Mike comes on my radio show, Operation Freedom, I am inundated with emails and phone calls from listeners asking me to get him back ASAP. And I'm honored to have back Dr. Mike Rectenwald. Mike, welcome back to the Operation Freedom platform and the Insider Insight Show.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's an honor, Mike. Now, a couple things. You have a website. It's very easy. Michael Rectenwald, RectenWald, michaelrectenwald.com. You have a YouTube channel. A couple of them. The Walden, like Walden Pond, The Walden, WALDEN, number 9. The Walden 9, not written out 9, number 9. The Walden 9. And a new venture, the Anti-PC Prof.
The Anti-PC Prof, that's correct.
Okay, now, in addition, Mike, you have been ostracized. You have been demonized. They have tried to crush you because of your, if you will, dissection of the social justice movement.
Right.
You have paid a huge price for that in many different ways. Mike, so that folks can support your efforts, and we're going to have this on throughout the interview, this link, but the best way to support you is through a GoFundMe page, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's linked to my website, michaelrectenwald.com.
Okay. Mike, they can go to michaelrectenwald.com. There will be a link to your GoFundMe page. I am having our IT guru, Nick, put your GoFundMe page and your website, we'll do the graphics here of our video.
Okay.
So that folks can support you. Because here's the deal, Mike. They have done everything in their power to shut you up.
That's right.
Everything in their power.
Right.
And for you to have a website, and a lot of folks get this, but some folks don't, it is expensive having a website. IT support, security, you doing the time to do the content. This is a great investment in the anti-PC movement, folks, in the freedom movement.
Right.
I can tell you, when we're done with this interview, because the GoFundMe page is new for Mike, I'm going to support Mike. And the reason is because I know him as a person, and I know him as a warrior. And this is what the deep state, the globalist syndicate, the Bolshevik left, this is the type of person they want to destroy and crush. Now, Mike, let's talk about how you became... Let's start with your foundation and then how you got targeted by the Bolshevik left, okay?
Sure.
Let's talk about your early years. As I mentioned, now some people, I think, thought that I was being really rude to you when I said where Mike came from. He came from being left of the Bolsheviks. Was that a fair assessment, or was that?
That's precisely correct. That is exactly what I was. I was what they called a left communist, and that is a believer in communism, but that the Bolshevik revolution was undertaken by the party vanguard, Lenin and Trotsky and their henchmen, and that they subverted the revolution by imposing their party will and their elite quest for power over the working class. So that's what I believed. I thought the Bolshevik Revolution was a mistake because it was led by Bolsheviks and that they were authoritarians and so on and so forth. Now, so I worked for many years as a writer doing essays and white papers on left communism and the perspective of that, developing it and in various ways on different topics. And then I came to clash with the social justice left in the university.
Now, Mike, while you were left of the Bolsheviks,
yeah,
they loved you.
Oh, totally. Everybody
Mike, they embraced you.
Right.
You became a professor at actually a very prestigious university, NYU.
Right.
A professor of global liberal studies.
Yes. Now, that's a kind of a liberal arts college within NYU. So it wasn't one of those grievance studies that people talk about. It was there's a bunch of different professors having different fields, and they gauge their own fields. So my field was literary and cultural studies, and so I wrote, and I did a lot of work in the history of science. That's really most of my research, but. For my political work, it was definitely in this left communist vein.
And you never had any negative feedback from administration or other faculty members when you were doing that?
Oh, as a matter of fact, the dean of the program used to talk to me and quote Marx regularly to me because I used to go back and forth between Carlisle, PA, where I had a girlfriend, and who, by the way, is a social justice warrior, and that was why that ended. The
relationship melted.
Yeah, that's right. He would talk about how, Marx said that, the provinces were stupefying and it making people into idiots. And
this was the dean.
That.
This was the dean saying that. Yeah,
the dean was a Marxist.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah, the dean was a Marxist, yeah. So, I can't explain to people outside of the academy the extent to which Marxism is pervasive. And not only is it pervasive, for example, now, rightly so, if you were to declare yourself a Nazi as a professor,
yes,
you would be roundly condemned. You would be run out within 5 minutes. You'd be destroyed. Rightly so. Mm-hmm. But Marxists are revered. They're revered on college campuses. Students revere them because they don't know any better. Staff and the rest of the faculty revere them because they're the real radicals, and so on and so forth. And the reason for that is that there has been a long march through the institutions, which is exactly what Marxists said that they wanted to do, is to undertake, according to Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist. There's a long march through the institutions to take over, since they couldn't topple the political and economic regimes of capitalism. They decided to attack the institutions instead, and this is what's called cultural Marxism. not really founded by the Frankfurt School, as so many people think. It's actually coming from Antonio Gramsci and then some other folks in England, actually, called the Birmingham Group. So there's a lot of things that people don't realize about this. But anyway, the whole point was to take over the institutions. Well, they have. They've taken over the institutions. And those institutions have become fully leftist. And some of the versions of leftism are social. One of the versions of leftism is social justice as well, which is just a way of what they did there with social justice. If you want me to just explain the connection to Marxism.
Please do, because that's important.
So Marxism takes class structure as the primary axis of interpretation. So the class, the ruling class, the capitalist class versus the working class. Mm-hmm. And the working class needs to topple the ruling class or the capitalist class, take over the state and run the country and own the resources and own the means of production. Well, what the social justice ideology does is it replaces class with identity. So no longer the ruling class of the capitalist class, it's the white male. So they need to topple the identity categories, not to take over the system, but to destroy those people, basically, so that they can then replace them with the correct identity, the ones that are the so-called subordinated ones. So that's what they're after there.
So then, Mike, here you are at NYU.
Yeah.
And then you realize, wait a minute. This social justice thing.
Yeah, it was out of control.
So what, I guess, what, was there an event? Was there a series of events that took you? So what were some of those events that got to you where you start to question the whole thing?
Yeah, they held my program held in the spring of 2016. At the end of the semester, they held a symposium on, basically on social justice. And they talked about things like trigger warnings, safe spaces, bias reporting hotlines, and these things. And they were instituting the bias reporting hotline in the fall of 2016. That is a hotline where professors, or students rather, can report if their professor commits a bias infraction in the classroom or anywhere else. Now, who knows what that means? Anything, basically, that could. So I thought, here they are establishing a Stasi state. You know, the Stasis were the secret government, the secret agents in East Germany, or the Cheka in the Soviet Union. The same thing. These were policing, that's what I saw, this kind of a surveillance system they were setting up, where they start to report on and turn in people, just like in the Soviet Union and East Germany and China. So that, they were throwing off campus speakers. Like, I was very much for free speech, always. And when I found out they closed off, they didn't let Milo Yiannopoulos speak in the fall of 2016 at NYU because they said some LGBTQ people might overhear him if they walked past the auditorium, even though the door would be closed. If they heard something they didn't like, it could trigger them. So they canceled that. Then there was all that. Then there was the election of Trump, and then they started with the safe spaces, where they had literally petting animals and pacifiers. So I thought it was absurd, totally infantilizing, and also pathetic that these people needed this sort of a safe space. So they were creating this kind of an echo chamber all the way around the university. And I started criticizing it on Twitter. I started a Twitter account called the Anti-PC NYU Prof. I started criticizing this, and then came to the attention of a student newspaper reporter who said, are you really an NYU prof? And I said, yes. Wow, that's interesting. Can we interview? And I said, okay, but I wasn't sure I'd go on the record. But after I gave the interview, I said, I have to be a coward if I don't stand behind what I'm saying. And I do stand behind it, and it'll have more authority if a real person is announcing themselves saying these things. So I did. Within 48 hours of that interview appearing, I was called into the dean's office.
He didn't want to talk about Marx then.
No, in fact, he pulled me close to him right away and said, I just want you to know this discussion has nothing to do with your Twitter account or the publicity you're receiving. I thought, really?
So why am I here? Yeah.
Exactly. So I knew that was exactly what it was about. Then, little did I know that the head of human resources would be brought into the meeting as well.
Oh.
So this is hot water. Now, I was up for promotion to full professor, and they had been waiting for 6 months to give us the answer, and I thought, they were going to use that as leverage against me. And what they did is they pressured me to take a paid leave of absence. They tried to suggest that I was mentally ill. They said people were worried about my mental health, and they suggested that I take a leave and get off campus, and that the head of human resources would follow me around the rest of the day. So I was being shadowed, in effect, on campus by the head of human resources. Then I found out from the New York Post, a reporter called me and said, listen, we stand behind you in what the university is doing to you. And I said, what? Because how did they know?
Right.
Well, there was this, at the same time as that I was in the meeting, a published open letter addressed to me from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Group, a new committee that had been formed during the summer.
Is that faculty? Is that faculty?
Faculty, deans, and students on this committee. They condemned me they called me guilty for the structure of my thinking, i.e. guilty of thought crimes. They said I was low on the moral hierarchy. They claimed that I had been incivil, which is really ironic in light of what happened later.
Right.
And they said I had committed ad hominem fallacies. I had attacked people personally. I had never mentioned a single person by name ever, and I still haven't really. And they just roundly said I was like a pariah. So they ruined my life right there. That letter destroyed me on the campus. It was the end, because now I was tainted forever. And I was on renewable contracts, so I had to be renewed regularly. So anyway, I took the leave. I came back. Whole semester went by. People wouldn't get on elevators. I was shunned by 100 faculty members. Nobody would talk to me. I was shunned entirely. People would not let me on an elevator with them, some of them. And then at the end of that term, on the very last day, I was roundly attacked by a bunch of faculty members out of the blue. I didn't say a word to them. They started attacking me because I was publishing a new book called Springtime for Snowflakes. And they said, what is this? How on earth what on earth is he doing writing about this? This isn't his field. And they started to scoff and scorn, and then all kinds of swear words. And I was called Satan. I was called a Nazi. I was called alt-right. I was called a sexist a sexist and a racist while they called me a short pants white devil and fragile white male.
But you were the racist. Well,
yeah,
they're calling you that. They're calling you that, but you're the racist. You're the sexist.
I was the racist. Okay. Oh, by the way, this is the crowd, included the head of that committee, who had indicted me for incivility. And these people are writing in all caps, "You white devil, Satan, alt-right, Nazi, sexist, misogynist," all this stuff in bold caps, screaming at me for days, and nothing stopped. I implored the dean, make this stop. This is outrageous. This was official NYU email. This was an official list. So I complained to the head of human resources and the head of EEO, or equal employment opportunity.
What about the president of NYU, Mike? What about the board, with the trustees or whatever they're called, regents, whatever they are at NYU?
They're all behind this.
Okay, so none of them got in contact with you. Said,
care. Listen, if they were doing this to a black woman they would crush that person.
Yeah.
If they did this, those people, if they had done this to any other identity category, they would have been fired immediately without any further explanation. It would have been gone. But you could do this because I'm in a category that's unprotected. In fact, is open game. It's hunting season, okay, for the white straight male. I'm all of those, and that makes me guilty. That's what I was guilty for. And they said, in fact, he's not guilty for being a white straight male. Why did they say that?
Yeah, right.
He's guilty for his thoughts.
Oh, yeah. Well, we currently, love him or hate him, we currently essentially have a president being brought up on impeachment for thought crimes.
That's right. Yeah, that's what they're
of what
saying
he was
now.
thinking when he made that with the phone call with the Ukraine guy.
It wasn't what he did. It was his intentions now. Yeah.
Wow, it's what he was thinking about.
They're mind readers now.
Right.
So they really are. These are Stalinists. And they're just, as I call social justice warriors, I say Stalin just weirder. SJW.
So then they put you on leave.
Yeah. I had come back from leave, and guess what they do when I get back? After that semester, rather.
Yeah.
They put me in the Russian department. They moved my office without any of my books. They moved my body and into the Russian department in an office totally excluded, totally marginalized, ostracized, and no name on my door, no services, no secretarial no connection to any printers, no anything. It was a gulag of my own, because they put me in this room that had metal shelves. They were bare. They had no accoutrements at all. I had no services. I was completely banished.
They put you in a closet, Mike.
Basically.
Yeah.
And I called it my personal gulag in the Russian department. I was in my own Siberia there.
Yeah.
And so they made it untenable and impossible for me to subsist in that environment. And that basically I brought things to a head by inviting Milo Yiannopoulos to come to my classroom. Now, I'm not necessarily a believer in what he said, everything he says, but I defended his right to say it. And I wanted him to talk on Halloween about the politics of Halloween. And he had some very interesting speech written, which I vetted. And he was saying a few things like you can't say in a classroom. You could say them elsewhere, but not in a classroom. I vetted it. I made sure there was nothing objectionable. Get this. There were major groups protesting, getting ready to protest this. A classroom visit to 14 students, okay? That's all it was. Guess who shut it down, Dave? The mayor, de Blasio. De Blasio shut it down.
Well, doesn't he worship at the altar of communism?
Yes. Yeah. And isn't that interesting that so NYU couldn't stop it because it was my academic freedom. So if they'd have done that, I'd had a huge suit.
What was his justification, de Blasio, for shutting this down?
Said they couldn't handle the security for the event, given that it was Halloween and there would be the Halloween parade, which was at night, a totally different time. So it was a total lie. Basically, what I think happened is NYU's president called him and said, "Look, we got an issue.
Right, help us out.
We can't shut this down because we'll be in jeopardy for violating this professor's academic freedom, although we despise him. Would you step in and shut it down?" So I brought this thing to a head by doing that. And I figured after that they would come to the table to just negotiate, and they did.
And they did.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't very, I should say it was really a great exit plan, but I had really no better choice. I had about 2 years left on my contract. I would have gone up for renewal and would not have been renewed.
Right.
So it was either leave with a small parachute now or without one later.
So essentially, we hear about man without a country. You're a prof without a university.
Yeah, I'm conducting my own university on my own.
And that's your website, michaelrectenwald.com. That's the YouTube channels, including anti-PC prof on YouTube.
Right.
And that's your classroom now. Now, here's the interesting thing, Mike. As you know, I have a couple kids, and they went through the whole college thing.
Yeah.
And when I went through college, there wasn't the internet, Mike. I'm an old guy, right?
Yeah.
But obviously when they did, there was. And they said, Dad, if you really want to find out about some of these guests you have that are professors, go to ratemyprofessor.com.
Yeah.
So I did for you. And
Okay.
So here's what I found, Mike. So the guy who was shoved in a closet, the guy who had the faculty coming down on him, the dean coming down on him, de Blasio, saying, hey, buddy, no, we're shutting this thing. Okay. Here's what.
Should be able to make something out of that, right?
So I go ratemyprofessor.com, put your name in.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike. The students gave you beyond top rating. Okay.
Wow.
Even now, granted, students who could have, remember, they had that whole committee that if you say something that offends them, they could file complaints about you. Right. Not one. And here's 99.9% of them gave you the top ranking.
Wow.
Okay? And here's what they also said. There was one word that kept coming up in your reviews. Dr. Rectenwald cares about me. He cares about our class. He cares about what we have to say. And several people said, even though we disagree with Dr. Rectenwald, he always listens to us and challenges us and doesn't discount us.
Yeah.
And treats us with dignity and respect.
That's nice.
Okay. Oh, no. So I call my daughters and I say, hey, so this Dr. Rectenwald, he's like 99.9%. They go, Dad, Dad, you're not reading it right, Dad. Because it is rare for a prof to have a rating of over 70%, okay?
Yeah.
I go, well, you look it up. Okay. And they both looked it up, and they called me, and they go, Dad, you were right. I go, I know I'm right. I can read. I mean, for goodness sakes, I do analysis stuff. It's not that. No, Dad, we've never seen anything like this. And they both looked at some of their best, the best professors they had because both went on to graduate school at several different levels. Okay, and they both said we looked at the best professors we had, and they were nowhere near what Dr. Rectenwald had as far as evaluations from the students. So you get these glowing recommendations for students, which is beyond difficult.
Well, let me tell you why that is, because I didn't indoctrinate anybody, ever. I never conducted my classroom as a site of indoctrination. It was a way of critical thinking, not teaching, not telling people what to think, not driving them to conclusions, but actually teaching them how to think and how to evaluate claims and how to evaluate historical data, how to evaluate and how to write, how to express, how to think and express. So you can't teach writing without teaching thinking, which I found to be the foundation of it. Mm-hmm. So, and I would never ever evaluate a student based on their politics, but this is happening all over the place in the universities. Students are terrified to tell the truth about what they think.